Genesis 2:16. Okay, and this is going back to the garden, and like I said, you got to understand the spiritual aspect of things before you tackle what parts are metaphor, what parts are literal. You just got to, if you can understand it spiritually, that's the first thing. That's the priority. And this is very controversial. A lot of people think this is nonsense, but an observant person can tell, spiritual realities through just observing the world. A lot of people are easily deceived. They're easily brainwashed. That they don't understand how evidence and things can be manipulated and how they can be manipulated. But an observant, a discerning mind will see spirituality in the world. That you can only deny it for so long before you start to understand how things work, and how you have forces of creation and destruction that rule, and how they war against each other. So, and picking up with Genesis 2:16, and the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. From the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. So he gives them the warning here. God tells him the truth. Now maybe Adam doesn't understand exactly why this is, and who he is and where he came from and all that. Because in our finite minds, we don't always understand everything. But he gives him a command, and he says he's going to die in the day that he eats of the tree. And more important than, people debate, physical versus spiritual. But spiritual death, Jesus came to set us free from death. And we need to keep that in mind. So now we're going to see the serpent come in, and we're going to watch him poison. God created something beautiful and pure and innocent, and we're going to see him poison it. And there's a reason why. He can't take control of something until we open the door, until we sin, until we go against God. It's only first comes the lie to get us to trick us and get us to sin, and then comes the sin, and then comes the consequences, and then comes the destruction. So the serpent said unto the woman, "Ye shall not surely die." So he's saying the opposite. Well, this is a lie. This is flat out a lie. And any way you want to look at it, spiritual, literal, this is a lie. He's saying there's not going to be consequences, but there were. For God doth know in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So, and the word God here is Elohim, and it means divine beings. So, and the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. And when the woman saw that, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So they sin. It's that simple. They don't, and we're going to see this with the history of Israel, that they don't always understand why God says what he says, and why God, in their finite minds, they don't always understand the consequences of what they're doing, but it always plays out that we see in the end that they should have listened to God because he was right. Because when we move down here and we look at Genesis 3:15, we see that the serpent has gained access into the world. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And this, of course, is about Messiah, who was bruised in the heel. This is one of the first prophecies in the Old Testament about Jesus Christ, one of the first messianic prophecies. But the enemy, it says that he will put enmity between the two seeds. So all of a sudden it's saying that there's a seed that he gained something in their disobedience, and that he was able to poison through his seed the world. And this even looks forward to Jesus taught the parable of the wheat and the tares, or the weeds, the wheat and the weeds, and that the weeds try to destroy the wheat. They try to, because that's what the devil does. He tries to make the world, he tries to make the world a place that he has ultimate power over. And how does he do that? Through sin, through lies, through his seed. In other words, he poisons something, and then as that poison works, he's the one that's able to come in and essentially take over. Why use the metaphor of a serpent? Because what does a serpent do? I'm not a biologist, but how does a serpent feed? It bites something, it injects poison into it, and the poison does the work. The lies do the work, and then that's how it gets its meal. That's how it survives. That's how it prospers, is through deception, is through poisoning something that was healthy before. It's the process of disease and death, and it uses that, and we see this metaphor, and we see this type throughout the Old Testament. Now, that he did the same thing with the nation of Israel. God creates a nation that he believes that he wants to serve him and not be like the heathen, to not be like the Gentiles, God wanted a nation that was pure, that was supposed to rule all the other nations. And the devil poisoned it. He poisoned Israel, and that's why Israel didn't survive as a nation. They went into exile. Enemy after enemy. God sent the enemies against them, because just like the venom of the serpent, once that bite happens, it goes through the whole body. It touches every part. Something that's corrupt will often overpower something that's pure. You take a little bit of corruption and put it into something pure, in a little while that whole thing is corrupt. And the scriptures using that metaphor, that the seed that the serpent plants, it prospers and divides and corrupts the whole. In other words, unless you start with something even if you start with something absolutely pure, once it gets corrupted, he's able to destroy it. He's able to bring enemies. He's able to tear it down and make it something that he can have power over. So